Alright, let's go ahead and get started for the day, guys. 1 second here while I let all you know through the socials that I just went live. And let me mute this one thing real quick, and I think we'll be good to go. Cool. Alright, so we're still working on Kumadori, our bear samurai. And we are going to be taking a look at getting rid of some of the replacement or kind of stand-in pieces that we have currently. So that means stuff like the belt loops that we had previously, which we replaced at the end of the stream yesterday. And that also means either replacing or maybe adding some texture to some of these pieces. I was playing around with some different noise options and ideas for stuff that we could do with these. I have a feeling that these are going to be pretty dark in terms of color. So I don't think, and just because of the size of them, I don't think it's going to be a huge issue. But we can still play with all of that, as well as kind of bringing up some of these other pieces into a level of completion. You can see up here, I replaced this strap around the helmet here, around his chin. I replaced that with the same rope brush that I was using for these belt loops down here. So we can continue to do a lot of that stuff. And hey Craig, how's it going, man? Welcome back. We can continue doing a lot of that stuff and trying to figure out what we want to do with everything else moving forward. So let's jump in and get to work. Alright, 1 second here. Let me grab my references. And if I can find it. Alright, cool. So again, you guys have seen this multiple times. Just a few pieces of armor or a few sets of armor that I've been looking at. And I would also like to maybe play around with color during this stream. See what we can do, see where we can go with that. I pulled up a little bit of an image over, let me log into this real quick. I pulled up this guy. Just looking at some green samurai armor and thinking about color schemes. Maybe we want to do something a little bit darker for the actual armor and then have the rope and the trim and that kind of stuff be green. I do like the idea of doing like green armor with some gold or yellow trim. I think that's a pretty cool just kind of color schematic there that we can go off of. Let me log into my external chat though real quick, and then I can keep my images up on the side and still talk to you guys. So let me try that, if we can remember our password. There we go. All right. Cool, cool, cool. Okay, so like I said, we ended the last stream by replacing this these belt loops, these kind of stand-in pieces with some rope. Did the same thing with the chin strap up there. And now I've kind of gone on to looking at these sorts of pieces here. And we can step back up through my undo history all the way up. I just have a little bit of noise applied on here, not applied to the mesh. We can play with that. I haven't done surface noise too much on stream, so I haven't really showed it off very often. The preview that you see in here isn't exactly what it's going to look like, but it does a pretty good job of giving you an idea of what it'll look like before you apply it to the mesh. So if we open up Noise Plug, we can actually come in here, and there's a lot of different options that we have. So we might be able to just do something with some of these, and we can kind of try to orient ourselves a little bit better. Just because the orientation of our pieces, we're probably going to get a pretty bad spiral or loop, depending on kind of what we choose here for stripes or spiral or whatever. We might be able to do something interesting with snakeskin to get like a rope-like effect if we want to play with that. We can also turn off mix basic noise, so we're not getting the basic noise in there. Or I can turn, I believe, just to the, there it is, mix basic noise, and turning that all the way down to 0. And then we can just get the snake noise in here, and I can play with the scale in here as well as the scale and strength of that. So we can play with all these things to try to get a bunch of different variations from there. So there's a lot of different stuff in here. I've used the Perlin noise quite often. I think that's pretty good for like general noise stuff. What's good about the Perlin noise is it might be able to give us kind of like that fuzzy texture that you would have on rope. So I'm not sure if I want to go through the trouble of replacing every single one of these with this this particular rope brush that I have here. I don't know if that's really worth it, but I think we can play around with maybe getting a little bit of texture on here. And I can't really move this window. It's not really cooperating, so that's fine. We'll play with it. So Perlin noise, just kind of playing with the whole scale option here. If you guys are just familiar with ZBrush at all, you'll know that the sliders in ZBrush kind of have a dual slider purpose. So if you click it once and you grab this bottom slider, you'll see that another slider will appear on top of that one. Me sliding this, it'll slide pretty quick and it'll match my mouse 1-to-1. But if I grab that top slider, it'll move, I don't know what the ratio is there, but it'll move a lot less, and you can make a little bit more fine-tune adjustments there. Or if you want, you can always just come in there and type exactly what number you're looking for. I like to use that little bit of a smaller slider there, though. So we can maybe play with some of these sliders just to see what different interactions we can get. And you can also mess, again, like if you were doing spirals or something, you can mess with your angles of rotation, and you can mess with your scale in all 3 different directions, your X, Y, and Z, to play with that. Here, it's not really going to matter if I offset this just because it's a random noise that I'm applying on here. So we can apply that and at least get an idea of what it's going to look like. It looks a little stone textury right now, and that's just the preview. So if we say apply to mesh, get a little bit better idea of what that'll look like as it's now actually converted to geometry. And I could see these, if they were a little bit darker, kind of having just some texture and looking like rope. I think that's kind of the direction we want to head in. But for now, what I would like to do is not move forward on anything just yet. Kind of just leave them that way for now. But we can, if we want, we can save this noise, these noise settings that we have made. And then if I want to go through and apply them to these pieces up here, or any pieces on the shoulder, or anything else, we can do that pretty easily. Another thing I want to look at is doing some Boolean operations on some of these pieces for the rope to kind of fit through. Having kind of just slits for that, so it's not just kind of bleeding into the mesh. Similarly, up here we just have it kind of blending into the geometry. So I want to get rid of all these things, and it'll take time to do all this. But stuff that's kind of new to ZBrush 4.8, so I think it'll be somewhat interesting to take a look at. So this is our belt, which again, we'll be adding some texture to as well. Try to get some leather texture on there. I think that'll be interesting. But before we do that, I just want to kind of align it with my mesh here a little bit better. And then, of course, doing all this, we'll have to adjust our ropes as well. Now, so for live Booleans, since this is somewhat new to ZBrush 4.8. And we've done this on here before, so it's been out for a while. It's nothing crazy new, but I think it'll be neat to try to play with. So what we're gonna have to do is I'm just gonna start off with this piece here. I don't have auto collapse turned on, that's great. I'm gonna make this a start group and this a start group, and then I'm gonna have a negative piece in between those. And the reason I'm making this one also a start group is so that the negative so this is a start group, and anything under here will perform a Boolean operation on this piece as well until it reaches the next start group. So essentially what I'm saying is only be affected by what I put in between these two pieces, which is, in this case, exactly what we want. So preferences, quick save, we'll just increase that a little bit so we don't get too bothered. I'm going to duplicate this piece. We're going to turn on live Boolean already. If I make this a negative, you'll see that piece completely disappear because those pieces are completely overlapping one another. And let's see, what do we want? Let's try a cylinder. So typically I just do a 212Y cylinder. And we have perspective on. Let's turn that off so it makes it a little bit nicer to work with, and crease all of these edges. Alright. Now when I move this forward, you're going to see it start to cut into that piece. Let me turn off polyframe so you can kind of see how that's cutting in there. All that's updating in real time for the live Boolean. That's great, but that's not how we want that to be applied there. So let's shrink our cylinder way down. And let's turn it back on positive, just so we can kind of not deal with that lag and try to align this a little bit better. Make ZBrush be a little more friendly for us. So we have a lot of geometry in this scene as well, so a lot of that can kind of be bogging down some stuff. Let's keep surface open. I just kind of want to turn a couple things off here, not that specifically. Just to hide a little bit of geometry. I'm going to turn off my symmetry there, scale in, and kind of try to line this up with the rope here. And then click on the surface here, stretch it out a little bit, and let's see what that looks like once I turn that on negative. So we get a nice little cut in there for the rope to fit through. And now we can mess with kind of just scale here. And making that a little bit smaller. And next, let's just kind of control, click, and drag and scoot it over. So essentially I have two of those now. So see that geometry, that's what it looks like. That's the negative shape that it's creating. And it just kind of gives a little bit more purpose to the geometry here. So we have these, you know, if you look here, it's just kind of blending directly into that geometry, but if we give it kind of a little bit more reason and I guess reality for what would be happening there, things can start to make a little bit more sense. So obviously, if we wanted to make this actual geometry here, I'd have to perform a live Boolean operation. I would also have to subdivide this piece and then convert it to real geometry. If I were not to subdivide that piece, we might get some really weird issues when I do go to subdivide it, just with some creasing and everything like that. So we can maybe try to do it without subdividing first and just kind of see what interaction we get. But let's keep going here with this geometry that we have. So I'm going to take this piece, I'm going to turn it back on positive, just so we can stop the lagging there a little bit. And do the same thing over here on the left. And just kind of rotate this into place. And line it up. So again, just kind of giving this purpose and always trying to answer all those questions of why. So I don't want there to be anything on my character, even though, you know, it's stylized and it exists in a fictional world. I still want things to kind of obey natural laws in a sense of gravity, in a sense of, you know, I don't, physics, just like stuff bleeding into each other doesn't really make much sense. That's not how it would operate in the real world. So take a look at that. And now I want to do somewhat similar here to this front piece. I want it to kind of be positioned in a essentially similar place. Let me dynamically subdivide that. So those are about the same height there. So all that means is that I just need to kind of adjust my rope and get that better into position. So let me find that subtool again. And now we can just kind of squash this down. And you see all this weird geometry happening there. It looks like it's trying to show some backface masking. That's just live Boolean being a little bit funky. And just kind of, I'm not entirely positive what's causing that. It might just be the complexity of the geometry that I have here, and the live Boolean not being too friendly. But either way, it's just kind of not exactly what's happening there. So just understanding that the geometry is still fine. The live Boolean is not going to affect this piece whatsoever. They will be completely separate operations. So we're all good there. And maybe we can play with how that'll line up against the belt a little bit better as well once we get there. But then just coming here and doing a mirror and weld, and let's do that a little bit different. So I'm just going to split hidden, then mirror and weld, and merge back down. I didn't want to mirror and weld this inner piece. I kind of wanted to keep that separate. So now we have those interactions starting to take place, and if we're kind of happy with that on this piece, we could perform an actual Boolean op and then convert that to geometry, which we can do here in a little bit. But let's kind of keep going here with the process we got, and we can make some more negatives. Cool. All right, so let's just duplicate this piece, I think. I'm gonna hide our old one, just because I want to keep this on positive. And I can try to line this up. Now we did some stuff with array mesh in, I think 2 streams ago. We were playing around with array mesh for the detail up here, for replicating that along a specific curve. We could do the same thing here, but it would be a little bit of a complex operation, and I don't think it's worth the time kind of playing with slider after slider and adjusting your pivot point and all that to get the specific interaction that we need. So I think just doing this manually is going to be a lot faster, which you guys know I'm fine with. I prefer most of the time to do everything manually anyway. And let's do a negative here, just so I can kind of see what this is looking like. And it looks like we're not getting the cut in there. Ah, silly me. Let's make sure we have the correct geometry. So we would want this side piece now. Shift our new geometry under that and then make that a negative. So making sure that we just have everything within the correct start group here. And I just want to adjust this geometry a little bit. And maybe here a little bit as well. Okay. So we have some negatives going on here. And now I just want to hide the rope just a little bit and kind of get this into a similar position as the other pieces. So let's turn our positive back on, quit the leg, and rotate a little bit and try to line this up a little bit. And let's go back up. I just want to see the position again for these pieces. And I think that looks pretty close. I'll move it down just a tad. And then we can create another. And let's turn that negative back on. And grab our rope. And kind of see what that's going to look like there. So we need to squash this down just like we did for the other two. And kind of help get that into position as well. And that's the basic process. It's pretty, I think the live Boolean system in ZBrush is one of the most important updates that the software has ever received. I would say ZModeler and live Booleans are just have absolutely just completely changed people's workflows. I mean, the way I now just think about my personal, toolkit and what I have available to me in the software, it's completely different now after this last update. I'm really hoping that they keep improving at the rate that they have been these past few years. There's been just some really awesome development going on in the software, which makes me very excited for the future of ZBrush, of the Pixelogic. Who knows? Will we get a 4R9 or will we get ZBrush 5? Let's find out. All right. Quick lineup here. And kind of want to just turn this off. I'll look at those more later. Noise might be causing a little bit of lag as well. And give me a negative, please. And I think I want to raise those up just a tad. And rotate them. Cool, cool, cool. And now we'll do another Boolean group. So we want this piece. We want to make this a start group. And which piece is this? Okay, so that's fine. Those are good. I'm just gonna make these subtractions and turn them off, just so I don't have to worry about them anymore. So merge it down, Boolean subtract. Awesome. I'm gonna duplicate one of these and move it up into that start group up there. And make sure that's good. Start. Okay, cool. So a little bit of organization work, but not too hard. Luckily, earlier this week we went through and organized all of our geometry into sections of organic and hard surface, essentially armor. We split up the hammer into its own group, and we split up anything that's just part of the character into its own group as well. So with live Boolean came all these start group functions, and with that, you know, everybody's been kind of dying for some new ways to organize our subtools, and we haven't really got that yet, but with live Boolean came a little bit of a hack to kind of create folders in your subtool lists with auto collapse. Now your start groups kind of work like folders. You can turn on large sections and turn off large sections of subtools if you need to, and that's intentional. That's I think their version of that for now. I hope that we see a little bit more improvement on that in the future, and I think we will. It's just a matter of when we will actually get all that. So hopefully sooner rather than later, but you know, I have confidence in what they're doing, and like I said, we've gotten some pretty awesome stuff here recently, and I wouldn't be surprised if we saw something like that in the next update. And duplicate this guy. And last one. So here's a thing with transpose not a lot of people know. If you have an object that's kind of off its rotational axis and you would kind of like to zero that back into a flat, well, and by flat I mean you want to orient that back with your axis. If you have a flat on your geometry like I do, I can click this and it'll snap to that flat piece of geometry. It'll snap to the normal of that face. You can do this anywhere on your mesh. But when you do it on a flat and you turn on rotate and you hold shift and rotate, I can just snap that back to its original axis and then click that normal again and do it from the other angle. And look at that, it's perfectly aligned back up with those axes. So there's another little transpose trick for you. I use that one all the time. It's very helpful when you're trying to orient a 3D print to a print bed. I use it. I used to use it every day, multiple times a day. Now I just use it when I'm trying to orient geometry in a specific way that I need, or if for any reason I would be 3D printing anything. And we have a little bit off on this side angle, so let's try to orient that a little bit better and get this into place. And we'll make that a negative, and that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. The angle, the kind of pinch in that's being created by these might cause some issues. So there might be some tweaking to the geometry that we have to make. So maybe just a quick little selection here, and then a tug pulling those in, maybe even farther. We can play with it, but essentially I just want to, that's not, I'm pretty off the symmetrical axis. Let's turn on local sim. That'll be much easier to work with. Guess not. Doesn't want to work. So we'll just do it one at a time, just to see if we can kind of grab these verts. So essentially the negative that's created here isn't going to have that pinching structure down in the middle now, and that would be pretty weak geometry. if you were to 3D print that. Anything that's kind of coming to a sharp point, there are places and reasons where you can do that, but the less you have of those, I think the better in general. So maybe just playing around with tweaking some of those pieces will be for the best overall. So 1 second here. All right. So let's look at some of these. Again, that negative here, this live Boolean, I have a lot of polygons in this scene, and then turning on live Boolean and having a subtraction occur can really start to bog stuff down. So I don't want that to be too crazy, so I'll probably just hide the geometry for now, hide specifically these negative pieces, and come back to them later. I know that they're there now. I know that we did a good job, and we can worry about actually creating those live Booleans next. So I just want to make a little bit of a tweak to some of this geo. Make sure that's masked off. And we still have a little bit of a tucking in there. Not nearly as much as we had previously, though. I think this shape makes more sense in general as well. And the way I'm kind of moving these vertices so perfectly is I'm just snapping from point to point with the transpose tool. Which again, another great reason to use that transpose tool. Okay, I can turn that one off, and last tip over here. Whew, Ben is tired. It's Friday, and it feels like Friday. All right, last one. Cool, cool, cool. Let's just turn all that on real quick. Make sure we didn't miss anything. I'm gonna merge these guys down. We got negative, negative, negative on this side. Everything's good. And it looks like maybe we just need to mirror and weld some stuff and call it. So split hidden, mirror and weld. Always goes from the positive to the negative. And down here, those are good. And these simply just need to be mirrored and welded. And boom, maybe just a little tweaking of the ropes around this belt and we should be good. And it's a little subtle difference that we have here going on now, but I think it makes a big difference over time. So that's kind of what this exercise has been this week, making a lot of little tweaks. And if we went back and rewatched the stream from Monday of this week and just kind of saw all these little changes that we made, just kind of see how they all add up. I think it's always really interesting to look back on not just your old work, but just kind of the progress of even a single piece can be helpful as you see how something develops over time. But yes, we do want to turn off those negatives, getting that lag. We don't like that. We don't like that lag. I think I missed one. Yes. There we go. Okay. So we have that interacting with the armor a little bit better from a physical standpoint. Could do something similar up here. I think these straps look very derpy, very placeholdery. Doesn't make much sense physically. So let's tweak that and get that to a closer place of reality. And then it's also a matter of deciding where I would like to use this rope brush. And I think that might be a good place to do so, up there. So I think it's a matter of deciding not just where all I want to do this. Maybe it's more of just a belt thing down here. It's probably all going to be the same, but I think we could make an excuse to not do the same kind of braiding on these pieces here. These could be different, I think, but everything else I think maybe should fit within this same style here. It wouldn't be hard to redo this though if we really wanted to. So placeholder geometry, that's what we kind of thought of it as, and I don't have a problem deleting any of this. But let's make sure things are the way we want here. So this piece here maybe needs to be resting against the body a little bit better from this side view, depending on how taut it's pulled. I think at least the middle needs to for sure be resting on the body. This is still a low subdiv piece with just a dynamic smooth operation applied to it. So let's just make sure that that is touching a little bit there. And then if I were to 3D print this, I would probably have to do some kind of drafting. Let me grab my pen. Some kind of drafting to this so that we didn't have, just to make sure that we didn't have any gaps through here. Try to avoid as many of those as possible. Like up through here. A lot of this area would cause a ton of problems for 3D printing, so I would have to specifically draft this bottom edge. I can attempt to do a quick example of that. So drafting it in without catching that trim, the mask wasn't so great, but essentially to this idea of drafting that into the body to prevent any gaps or anything like that in that area. All right. Now, while tweaking some of that, it looks like the trim is a little out of whack here. So let's just kind of make sure backface masking is turned off. Kind of adjust this a little bit. Make that a little bit more even. Okay. So I'm going to hide those. Look at this rope, or these tubes of geometry that we have going on here. And let's grab our rope brush and attempt to follow one of these edges. Might be easier if I subdivide this piece just to get a little bit more geo in there, and with that, having a specific edge that I can follow a little bit better. Might be even easier if I started the curve out at a lower ZBrush, or I'm sorry, draw size, but a higher resolution for the brush. So a little bit more steps taken currently, but we will fix that as soon as I increase the draw size. Getting a little bit uneven there. And move on to the back here to finish our curve. And I have symmetry on, but I cannot continue the curve on that side, so I gotta keep going here, which is fine. No worries. And pull that all the way down. And again, that's nowhere near as thick as we want, right? So as soon as I increase my draw size, what's going to happen is it's going to decrease the number of steps that the geometry takes. And it's not looking like it wants to cooperate. So let's step back a little bit. Oh, we accidentally selected our pinch brush, so we cannot use the pinch brush to modify this. We have to have a curve brush selected. So increase our draw size and reselect that. So just careful that you make sure you got your correct tools in use. So increasing the draw size on that. I think that looks like a pretty good size. So from here, what I want to do is just click anywhere on my mesh. That'll delete the curve. If you're having trouble deleting a curve, all of your curve functions are in your stroke palette. And here is specifically delete. So we can get rid of that if we need to. So just another way to go about doing that. And we have this geometry here that we no longer need. I'm just going to delete it and take a look at adjusting our rope a little bit more. And we put that on top of the other curve, so I might be able to just in general do a quick scale here and kind of pull that in a little tighter to the body. So let's see if we can do that. Pretty happy with that result. And then just kind of manually using a very large move brush and coming in and adjusting that. I actually like how tight this is on the body there. I like the gap that we get here, as there is a natural gap happening, but the rope stays taut. So I think that works pretty well. Having that play well with the trim there and go over top of it, not through it. And adjusting the rest of that to help it look a little bit better. Cool. Now it's a matter of getting a second piece in here. I would just like to have two, just so that, you know, if you had your shoulder or whatever piece you want to call your armor that's covering up his top of his deltoids and trapezius muscles, if there was maybe a single connection point, there might be a problem with the armor kind of rotating or flipping over at some point. So let's just get a second piece in there so it looks a little bit more sturdy in its connection, just like I had for the placeholder. So I'm just going to control click and drag, move that out, possibly just move this down a little bit, and I'm going to use a large move brush again. And adjust these pieces. And I'm going to make them touch a little bit here now, just because I know when I 3D print this, again, those gaps are going to cause issues down the road. So having this in mind ahead of time is definitely going to help us. And this geometry is a little more high poly than we would like for tweaking the shape in a drastic manner. So it's going to be a little bit harder to tweak. I'm going to turn on double just so I can see those back facing polys. I like to always see those. I would like it if that was on by default. It'd be nice. Now just a matter of kind of tweaking our geometry a little bit and getting some things into place. And we can create the subtraction pieces like we did previously. down here on the belt, and we can get rid of this placeholder geometry as well. And I duplicated it on accident. Let's delete, not duplicate. And let's actually come through here, grab our rope. We will duplicate our rope just so we have a little bit of geometry here to work with and place new geometry on top of. So now I wish I didn't delete those placeholders because it would have been a little bit easier to put a curve around those. We should still be able to make this work. So I'm looking at my armor over here, and the reason I have those loops, it's a little blurry, I know. Maybe this one's a little bit better example. So you can see the way that the rope kind of tucks in here to the armor and then wraps back out the other side, completing the loop and kind of holding it all in place. So that's kind of the look that I'm going for there. It seems like most of the armor kind of follows this same pattern, so that's the basic premise there, and we can maybe play with adding some stuff that's tying parts of the rope together as well on here. So let's do that, and we can keep going. And accidentally turned off my reference. It's jumping all across the place. There we go. Okay, so going back to our rope brush. Just a little bit here. And now I'm gonna try to force this to do what I want. When it doesn't have something to connect to, it can get a little funky. I actually don't know the exact like process behind it that decides where the rope chooses to attach to, or where the curve chooses to attach to. So when I get close to this, I can extend the curve, right? But it's going to place that pretty far back, I have a feeling, yeah. So I'm not sure what decision it's making there to do that, but it can be frustrating to work with on occasion. So I can try to just get a little bit of a curve here. This is pretty much what I'm going for, and then just increase the size. Get that similar. So as you see here, as I increase my brush size, it's decreasing the number of steps that the brush is taking. So even though my curve started off a little bit dirty, just kind of increasing my draw size got rid of that. And I could decrease my draw size back down, and it would kind of help smooth out that curve as well if I wanted to have you know, a smaller brush still. So just being able to temporarily bump that up is a good way to go about that. And I think that actually turned out pretty well for you know, deleting our placeholder geometry that we actually did want to use. We were able to kind of salvage that. So I'm just gonna put that in place, and possibly just move this a little bit lower so that the geometry actually has, or the rope actually has some time to kind of curve up under here. Depending on how thick the rope is, it'll depend on how flexible it is. So just kind of trying to think about that a little bit. And as you see here, as I start to add in a lot of these ropes and a lot of these new pieces, we did save this a little bit more towards the end, because just these straps here are, you know, 2 million polygons. So our total points are now at 31. That's roughly 31 million polys. So these things start to add up quick. That's why I had some placeholder pieces in there to begin with. So as we get up there, these things are going to get higher in poly count, but there are some things that I can do to kind of lower the poly count on these pieces And we can maybe play around with some of that as well and look at those techniques. So I just want to get this into position on the back. And of course, you know, if I were to hide the armor, this rope would be sticking into the character's back. But, you know, it's not seen, we're not worried about that. And just from what is visible, it does, you know, physically make sense. So I think we're happy with the interaction that we get there. And we can create our negatives for the interaction between the rope and the armor. I kind of do like what's going on here on this piece. It has a little bit of trim around where the rope is going in, so it's not just a hole, it's got a little bit of a positive around there. It doesn't look like it has that for where the rope comes out. Maybe on this piece it does. So I would like to kind of play around with doing that as well, and just try to kind of, you know, make a little bit more sense out of the interaction that's happening between all these pieces. On something like this piece here, maybe adding in some screws or bolts like I did up here so that it looks more like it's attached to this piece on top. Can look at some references for how some of that stuff is done in the armor that I'm looking at. But we can play with all of that as we go here. So lots of little changes, but again, it definitely starts to really come together, making sure, you know, that I am zooming out, noticing that his legs are missing, but that's totally fine. But just kind of zooming out quite often and getting a view of the bigger picture. I'm happy right now with not doing that too often, just because we already had placeholders there. So I'm not too afraid of continuing, you know, all this close-up work, and I'm happy with the direction that we will be going, because I've already kind of seen what it looked like without the high resolution of detail there. So with that said, let's add some more negatives in here. Duplicate this piece, and let's just grab one of these. We'll stick with the same shape, same basic shape. And try to subtract this. All right, now if I wanted to align this perfectly with the surface, I could create an insert mesh brush and then actually draw it out on the surface, and then this flat normal here would be aligned with that perfectly. But I don't really, well, you know what, for the sake of it, since we might be using this more, let's actually go ahead and do that, because we might want to be able to do that later as well. So I just kind of want to modify the geometry on this a little bit more. I have to mask that. There we go. Alright, now I just want to make this piece, essentially this is just a stretched cylinder, but we had the geometry there, so we'll just use it. So I want to create an insert mesh brush and then use this as a negative later on. So just looking straight on at this piece, make sure perspective is off, come into brush and come on down here, and we'll just say create insert mesh, and I'll say new. And now, excuse me, I can just kind of insert these wherever I want. I'll delete that. It's junk. Don't need it. And I'll duplicate this piece. I'm just subdividing this a few times just so I have a little bit more geometry to insert on. It'll snap to vertices typically, and in this case I want more vertices to snap to. So I'll draw that out on the mesh, and like I said, it'll orient itself to the surface very well. And then I can kind of slide this into position. And I can also delete any excess geometry that I have. So I can get rid of that, all these poly groups that we don't need. Let's see what that looks like as a negative. Kind of see the way that the rope is tucking into there. Adds a little bit more depth, a little bit more reality to what we're working with. So there's a little bit of bleed in there, but I think that's totally fine. Just shift that over a little bit. Okay. And that is taking place on the other side, but we didn't have symmetry on, so all of our changes were done terribly. Ah, no, I'm sorry, my angle was just not correct there. So we are actually good there. And then for this piece here, let's see. Let's go ahead and try to, well, I was thinking about adding some trim around these holes. I think that would be cool to do. But it might be easier to do after we do the Boolean operation, and that's just because we'll have actual geometry that we can snap to and create that that concentric kind of, it'll follow the edge loop, kind of like we did up here with these pieces. I subdivided this geometry a lot, and then took the top half and just drew a curve around it and snapped it to that edge. So that's how we got that to follow so well there. And doing the same thing here might be very helpful. It definitely would be very helpful, but I don't know if it's worth doing. Let's do some more live Boolean stuff. So because which piece is it? It's this piece. So I'm going to duplicate this. And essentially because the negative here is below this piece, we might have to create another start group, but I should be able to get this to interact in such a way where if I increase the size of this with local sim on, so we're just using the same piece duplicated, and let's shrink the length of this, and we can get some nice trim around there. Maybe that's a little bit too big, so we could actually force this into geometry. We could adjust some of the sizing here if I want to scale this down. This is just a very kind of quick way to get what we were looking for, but I think it works pretty well. I could even come in here. I don't have many verts here if I show you those, so just kind of using my move brush, pushing those in. So again, like I said, live Booleans are totally awesome. They give a lot of really cool freedom for creativity here, which I think that's what ZBrush strives to do a lot of the time. Try to take the software out of the equation, which I know sounds totally not like ZBrush if you've ever used it before. But I really do believe once you learn the software really well, it all becomes second nature, and it's all just a lot easier to work with. I'm gonna click on my surface and then click within this yellow circle and try to flatten out this surface, just because I don't want that to show up too well. And let's I'm just gonna step on up here, do a Dynamesh, do a little bit higher resolution Dynamesh, a little bit higher. Let's try 4K. Try to step back down. So 4K. This is such a small piece of geometry, won't even matter. And let's try this. Let's try to just slice off this top edge. I'm going to try to line that up as best as I can. Delete hidden, close holes, get a nice flat edge. This is a little bit dirty. None of that's really going to be seen though. I just need to kind of rotate this piece a little bit. Make that a little bit more visible on the bottom half. And maybe a little bit of a rotation here towards me, towards the camera. That subtraction we can maybe mess with a little bit. And if I wanted to do lower geo, just a lower poly count, I could try to ZBrush with polygroups on, and then maybe come through here and crease this edge. So crease edge loop complete, crease around there, and now we have a nice little piece to kind of work with. And our subtraction piece was pretty crap to begin with, but maybe we can fix some of that. So maybe I can bring, man, that was a terrible selection. Maybe I can bring these a little bit closer together. And just try to round that out. It might be better to just, you know, come on through here. If I do this again, I'll probably just rework this this piece of geometry just so we're not dealing with the same stuff and have to do this every time. It'd be easier to just create a cylinder and stretch it out, although I had two in there. Typically I enjoy working with what I already have instead of trying to just restart stuff from the beginning. Sometimes it's necessary though, so no worries here. We'll just fix it this time, and then we'll have it to work with in the future. And what's great about having this low poly count piece is that we can bevel edges really easily, can experience lag really easily. Live Boolean is tough to work with sometimes. So let's see here. If I were to bevel this edge, we might be able to make it a little bit more visually interesting. So non-symmetrical operation, that's fine, we can fix that. And just crease these edge loops here. And then maybe tweak the geo just a little bit. And maybe tweak our ropes a little bit to get all this interacting a little bit more friendly. And yeah, I think that's looking pretty good. That's the basic idea. Let's see, did everything go well over yonder? Let's just make sure we got mirror and weld here. Okay, so that bevel didn't take place across. So now it did. Is this good? Mirror and weld. Okay, now we're good. So a couple things just to make sure we're on the same page here. Awesome. I think that looks pretty good. But that's one down, many to go, right, for this completed idea now that we know the direction we want to take it in. So it's a matter of, you know, doing that multiple times from here on out. So next, make sure that looks like it completely froze my browser. Nope, we're good. All right, cool. Okay. So next we can take a look at the rope that we have going here. So this is more. Let me turn on that other piece as well. So these pieces serve an actual purpose. These pieces serve to kind of tie this geometry, these pieces of armor together. Similarly to this idea up here, we have two leading in, which loop up and connect to one another. Down here we have the same basic idea where this rope is kind of looping through these armored slats, tying it all together. We have the same thing up on the helmet. But I don't think that I want to use this geometry for this. I think I would be happy just doing some regular old noise to that, as well as this. These are more for aesthetic purposes, whereas these actually do serve a purpose. Similarly with these, essentially for the ropes, what I would like to do is I want the ropes to be used to tie the individual armor pieces together. So anything that's connecting one piece of armor to another, but interconnection like this, or interconnection like this, or anything that's maybe just aesthetic purpose, we can just add some form of noise or texturing to those to give those a little bit more character. But I don't think it's going to be necessary to specifically use the same form of braided rope on those. And if we want, we can even come back through and add some texture to our braided rope. Another thing I wanted to look at was, which I briefly mentioned, was saving poly count on some of this geometry, because I did say it was so large. So I'd like to try that on a little bit of a smaller piece here. So I'm worried that the Dynamesh isn't going to be a high enough resolution. So we can try a little bit of a hack to kind of make Dynamesh comply with what we want to do. It's a little bit finicky sometimes. I would say most of the time it works, but sometimes it doesn't. So let's see what we can get first here. So let me subdivide this piece up. And I'm at 2 million polygons on a very small piece of geometry. That's totally fine though. Let's Dynamesh as high as I possibly can. Now you can see that the form has, you know, it's not nearly as strong of a shape. It has kind of carried through here though, so if I'm happy with that, I'll just keep that. I would like to get it a little bit better though. So what I'm going to do, hopefully I didn't just put everything on low, I accidentally almost clicked that. So what I'm going to do here is come into size, or actually, let's use the deformation palette because this is what I normally use. So deformation, a little bit of a hack here. So deformation, size, and I'm going to drag this all the way up, 100. Okay? So now, this has increased the size of this by 100. It's also moved its position a little bit. And now I'm going to come here and Dynamesh. So the reason I did that, and it looks like we did get a little bit of a higher poly count, maybe not as much as we would have liked. So let me do it one more time. So size 100 all the way up here. Now let's see, we're quite a bit larger. Dynamesh. Let me make sure I do just a little bit of smooth here on a piece that won't be seen. I want this to re-Dynamesh. So the reason I did this was because the way Dynamesh works is it's based on the scale of your mesh somewhat to a degree, and it calculates essentially mesh density or polygon density. So with a resolution of 4096, that's the highest that I can go here by default. It's gonna distribute polygons within this size of mesh density. But because I have increased the size of my mesh, I've essentially said there is now more room for you to add polygons at the same mesh density size. So now all I have to do is come on down into deformation, decrease my size again, and look at that, it's right back into position, dynameshed. We have pretty close to the same resolution, and instead of 2 million polys, we have 320,000. And I'm gonna, step this back up simply because I want to be able to clean up the geometry a little bit more. We have some gaps and stuff going on here. But again, just a little bit of a trick to be able to get that to work in your favor. And it's been a while since I've had to do that again. Which is why I haven't, mentioned it in the past. It's pretty specific to a certain situation, but that's just, I can't remember where I learned that. In all honesty, it's probably just something that I played around with, and just kind of understanding how Dynamesh works. I think it becomes pretty apparent how you can use some of these tools and kind of hack them in a way to get them to work for you. So we'll clean that up, and we drop the poly count even lower simply because now it's not trying to create polygons in the middle of our piece. So drop our size down once, drop our size down twice, all the way, and it's immediately back in position right where we need it. Beautiful. And if I would like, I can even remesh this piece and get an even lower poly count. You can see we have some poly groups in here. I don't like that though. I don't want any of those, so I'll just Control W to polygroup all of that. And instead of, replicating that whole process, what I'm just going to do is duplicate the geometry and get it into position back here with that other piece, so we don't have to do that whole thing over again. Save a little bit of time. But yeah, I thought the first time I did that, I was like, would this work? And when it did, I was like, heck yeah, this is great. So like I said though, occasionally I have had instances where it doesn't work, or for some odd reason decreasing the size of my mesh has allowed me to Dynamesh at a higher resolution. I don't know why. Based on the way that I understand Dynamesh works, it doesn't make any sense. It could just have something to do with the scale of my mesh. I know a lot of the tools in ZBrush work best around 2 units in size, but where you can see here that this rope piece is quite small. But my character as a whole is roughly 2 units in size. From top to bottom, I think it might be right around there. Our units are actually a little bit janked up in here. So if I come into export, you can see my scale is all over the place. I'm just going to drop it all the way down. I'm going to zero out all of these real quick. Now my scale is on 1, and you can see that the height of my character is 1.6 units, so somewhat close to 2 units. But this export slider does affect your unit measurement using your transpose tool, and it will affect the unit size and size of your objects if you export them. So kind of understanding how that works is pretty important, I think. Let's see here. Got a little bit of some bleeding in through this geometry. Don't want any of that. Again, so I'm pretty happy with the way that this turned out here, creating this piece and this interaction. I'm pretty happy with how the Dynamesh turned out on the piece here. Again, I can, re-topo that Give it a little bit lower poly count and still have the same resolution if we want to. And I'm gonna be going through creating these interactions between the armor pieces, these holes and the trim and all that for a lot of these pieces. I'm also going to be going through and dynameshing a lot of these rope pieces to try to lower the poly count on these. So there's going to be a lot of repetitive work. Do you have ArtStation? Yes, I do. You can just look me up. I think I just have... I think if you look up Follygon, it'll be on there, or if you just look up Ben DeAngelis. I can't remember if I use my real name or if I use my Follygon name on there. If you go to my YouTube homepage, I might have a link to my ArtStation there. Just type in, I think just Ben DeAngelis. Again, I'm not off the top of my head. Let's see here. Yes, that's how you spell my name, Ben DeAngelis. So you can go check out some ArtStation things if you would like. DeAngelis. Okay, so a lot of this stuff is going to be very repetitive, so I don't want to continue to play around with a lot of that stuff here. So we can try to do something a little bit new. What are some more things that we want to take a look at? Do we want to start looking at color next? I think that would definitely be very interesting. Start heading in that direction at least. Let's turn off our hammer. Just kind of wanted to turn on all of our geometry here so we make sure we got everything. So yeah, I think we can kind of play with color and get an idea of what that's going to look like. Nothing final, but let's see here. I did end up clicking all low, I believe. So let's do high res visible. I'm just using Subtool Master to kind of step up through all the geometry and switch everything to the highest subdivision level. You can also do that over here though. It says operation complete, but it's a dirty liar. These still need to, let's try this. I wonder if for some reason Subtool Master doesn't play well with the auto collapsed start groups. That would be my guess there. Really though, I don't know. It's very strange. Alright, so we want to play around with color a little bit. We can take a look at some stuff here. What I'm going to do is just save some of these images and import them in ZBrush, and we can do some color sampling. I think I'm fine with this, and can just save that in our downloads. And I'm not sure if I'm a fan of the black armor with the green trim. So yeah, I'm not sure, like the darker armor with just like the green little accoutrements. I kind of like the green with the gold. So let's start with one, and we can kind of just play around here. So I'm gonna import an image, that image I just downloaded, and I'm just using this for color purposes. And grab that, add to Spotlight. Now I'll be able to sample this color through Spotlight, turn off our light box, and I should be able to keep Spotlight projection off and still sample these. Yes, okay. So decrease the scale here. And I'm just gonna grab a couple colors that we can, you know, maybe start working with and start playing with. So let's just say green, and we can start just doing mRGB. I'm gonna work with just Skin Shade 4. This basic material here for adding color, has a pretty good base for adding that on there. So let's just kind of go through here and start filling our objects with some color here. And I haven't given a ton of thought towards color, so we're probably gonna find out really quick what works and what doesn't. That's the whole point of doing this, to experiment and play around. For Barry the Bear, for our bear boy, I'm just gonna fill him with just a, well, actually, let's try this. So I'm gonna fill him with this and pull this down, get a little red in here, change our RGB intensity down to 50. It's gonna give a 50% color fill, way too saturated. Let's darken it. Let's try that color for now, just to do a basic fill here. And I'll increase my RGB intensity, so again, that's on 100%. I don't particularly like this color. I think it's quite a bit dark, quite a bit saturated. But just to get something in here, just to start splashing paint on the canvas. Go back to our green. Can do maybe some of these pieces here. And maybe if I can sample that gold color again, one of these. When sampling a color in Spotlight, you have to make sure that your Spotlight wheel is open, or you will not be able to press the C key and get an accurate sample of that color. It'll just take a sample of your canvas, which I assume you do not want. Let's try to darken that a little bit more. And if I do a, if I'm going for a final render here, I'm probably gonna get all these colors inside of Keyshot or something like that. If I'm gonna do like what the toy will look like, if or something like that. So we'll probably do that when we get there, but we'll keep going here. So maybe some dark leather for the belt, for the rope, maybe a little bit more desaturated and lighter than the trim that we're working with. But let's keep it all the same, keep our color selections all pretty similar as we start to get this on here. So I think I do like the direction of doing some like green and gold. I don't think that these will be the final colors that we choose by any means, but like I said, it's good to start just kind of splashing paint on the canvas and get an idea of the direction we want to go. Try to use a lot of the same colors so that I can just kind of easily duplicate that. And try to do that through here for all these pieces. And again, like I said, I still got a lot of work to do for a lot of the geometry and replacing a lot of the stuff, adding a little bit more interaction between the pieces like we did here a little bit ago. All of that to add towards the sense of reality that this character can exist in. But yeah, very quickly here we're starting to get an idea of just the direction we can take this. For the visor, I was thinking maybe more of a silver color. This is all gold and green and dark. I would like to maybe get some lighter colors in here. Maybe it is just a stick to the big three colors. Can play around with that a little bit here. So let's say here, same color gold, same color gold. Having this all solid green, I'm not a fan of. Adding in a little bit of brown, I can play with that. Not a huge fan, like I said, but just to get an idea. Let's see what maybe just some silver could look like. We pull that up through there. Not really a huge fan of that either. But yeah, just kind of playing here, experimenting with all of our colors, seeing what we can come up with. I don't know. I think, like I said, I didn't have a color. I had an idea for the color palette. We've been so busy on sculptural detail, though, that we haven't really had too much time to consider for that. Wrong brush. So we'll get there. And we'll just do a basic white for those teeth for now. And we'll make the eyebrows dark. I'll make the eyelids a little bit darker as well, not the eyeballs. Eyelids, thank you. Fill that in. Fill in our rope around here. So yeah, we're getting there. Let's try a little bit darker color. Skin color, same color as that. Don't want that. Like I said, I'm not a fan of doing complete green. I would like to get some breakup there. And I think maybe just switch it on up to pure white for now. Actually, we don't like pure white, do we? Too much, too bright. Maybe it's just a matter of finding that. Let's try to get a little bit of brown in here. So RGB intensity, drop that down really low, 10%. Give me some of that tongue red. So a little bit warmth to contrast the green here. So it's just, if you look here, I'll open up the color palette, you can see really there's what, 20 extra, less than 20 extra points in red. So I don't know if I do like that. I think it's a little much. So I need to think, you know, while I'm doing all this color, it's not just a matter of haphazardly slapping stuff on here, but color to kind of pick where, you know, as well as we were deciding earlier where we want focus to be sculpturally, color is going to help define that a lot as well. So we have the gold here, this yellowish color for the rope and the trim and everything else, but it kind of does help to frame the face. Maybe we can bring that up into the visor, and maybe that's not such a bad look. Maybe we can play around with just using this golden yellow to our advantage. Kind of playing with this. You guys can let me know what you think as well. If you think maybe it would be a better idea to get some, excuse me, some lighter colors in here to play with. Brighten up the armor palette. But for these pieces, we are going to want to separate all of the armor. So I'm just going to grab all those. I'm going to switch to my select rectangle tool. It makes it a little bit easier for selecting polygroups. So now when I do that, I can just grab them real quick. And we can perform a split hidden. It's gonna make it a little bit easier for applying our colors here to different geometry. And then if I need to toggle back to those later, we can do that. So same thing down here on these pieces. Split some stuff up. So selection, all of these, and split hidden. And I can apply that green color, which it looks like it already is. And for this, we can apply our gold up through there. And just kind of replicate that process. I think this definitely helps to visually break up our character as well a little bit better. It kind of just helps give us some fresh eyes, definitely for me, who's been staring at the sculptural form for so long, and then having the time to come back in here and add some color and get a completely new fresh perspective is definitely very, very helpful. I think that's kind of a good place to end for today, for our stream today. Oh, we missed a piece. We missed a piece of trim. Let's fix him really quick. Split hidden, fix him up. But yeah, I think that's a good place to stop for today, and be able to think about moving forward. Like I said, I do have a lot of repetitive work to do, and I would like to do a good portion of that off of stream. During my repetitive work that doesn't take too much thinking, pop in a podcast in the earbuds and go ham on one of those. But I think he's looking pretty good. I think, again, we still have a lot of work. We haven't added any texture or material to our hammer, so I'm excited to do that and play around with all that. But yeah, color really helps things come alive. That's why I'm kind of a big proponent of typically adding in color, adding in all your parts and adding in color as soon as you can. But for something like this character, I wanted to really push the sculptural form. So when I was kind of, going through here and just sculpturally working, I wanted to really focus on form density and interest. I really wanted to kind of focus on that, and I've said that a lot this week, and just having this nice top to bottom design of visual interest and having these periods of rest and all this stuff to add up. And then once I can get that really well, I can add color on top of that and have that really push all those things even farther still. So we will definitely get there, all in good time. But yeah, I think again that's a good place to stop. I want to thank everybody for coming and joining. It's a sleepy Friday afternoon for me. I got a lot of work to finish up other than this guy here. So until the next stream, probably on Monday if we can get lucky, maybe do a nice Saturday stream tomorrow. But yeah, until then, just keep an eye on the social media and I'll let you know when I'm streaming. All right. See you guys, and hope to see you all in the next stream as well. Bye now.